This is the final video in the DIY wardrobe build series, and in this one we're going to be looking at finishing touches. So that's going to include everything from scribing to screwing on your doorknobs. Other than the scribing, which can be a bit tricky sometimes, the rest of the jobs are quite small and simple, so you're really on the home stretch by this point. Once you've fitted your doors, your wardrobe's going to look almost finished, except for the gaps between your doors and your wall and your ceiling, and that's where scribing comes in. These gaps will be filled with profiles made out of 18mm thick MDF. Unless you live in a new build, which has been incredibly well built, the chances are you're going to have to do some scribing to sort out those wonky walls and ceilings. I'm going to show you 3 scribing methods and you can choose which suits your needs the best. The first one's probably the trickiest, but when done well, definitely gives the best results. I'm going to use scribing blocks to scribe down the wall and around the skirting. For the right hand side of the wardrobe, I first measure the height the profile needs to be and then cut it to length. It's then time to bring out the jigsaw. Make sure you've got a sharp blade and one that can be used to cut curves. I buy multi-packs from Screwfix. Roughly cut out the skirting, but be careful not to take off too much material. With the door unclipped from its mounting plates, offer the profile up. The notch that you've cut out for the skirting should allow you to get the profile pretty close to the wall. Set your combi square to anywhere between 10 and 30mm. I use 23mm here. Then run the combi square down the door side of the profile and adjust the profile's position so it's 23mm away from the inside of the framework from top to bottom. Clamp the profile in that position against the framework. What you're doing here is referencing the framework, which you know to be perfectly straight and plumb, i.e. vertical. This is where the scribing block comes in. I found the side that says 23mm and slot a pencil in. Next, I run that 23mm side of the block down the wall with the pencil tracking against the profile, leaving a mark 23mm away from the wall. The idea is that once you've cut away this side of the profile, the whole length of MDF moves across by 23mm, so it hugs the wall tightly whilst also being flush against the inside of the wardrobe's framework. It took me a while to get my head around this, but once you've worked it out, it makes total sense. Carefully cut down that line you've drawn with your jigsaw, taking it really slow. All being well, you should then be able to offer that profile up to the wall and you'll have a tight scribe all the way up, with very little gap between the wall and the profile. You can see here from the back of the wardrobe how the inside edge of the profile is perfectly flush with the framework. Once you're happy, apply some grab adhesive using a caulk gun to the back of the profile and push it up against the framework and wall. You can just push it up against the framework for 30 seconds or so until the grab adhesive takes hold, but I like to clamp it in place and put a few pins in just to make sure it stays in position. You can then clip the door back onto the mounting plates and you should have a consistent reveal from top to bottom. Remember that the hinges you're using do have some adjustability, so don't worry if it doesn't look great first time. I use the same technique for the top profile. Don't worry if there's a gap of up to 2 or 3mm between your profile and the wall. This can easily be covered with caulk at a later stage. The second scribing method I'm going to show you also uses a scribing block, but this time, rather than scribing around the skirting, you cut it out with a multi-tool. While this method is a bit easier than the first, it really is only possible with a multi-tool. Use some scrap 18mm MDF to mark a cut line on the skirting, and carefully remove that section with a multi-tool. This leaves a slot in which you can slip the profile in, meaning you don't have to worry about the fiddly scribe around the skirting. You'll be well on your way by this stage. The third and final scribing technique I'm going to show you is only really possible when you've got quite straight walls. But the big plus is that you don't need a scribing block or any specific scribing tools at all. All you need is a tape measure and a pencil. Here you can see me taking measurements between the floor and the bottom piece of framework every 30cm. I then mark these measurements onto the bottom profile, join them up and cut with a jigsaw. This can be a really effective method, but only if your wall, ceiling or floor is linear without lots of bumps and irregularities. You can see here that for this bottom profile, the width of the wardrobe was too long to just use one length of MDF, so I used 2 and shampoo the 2 edges that meet to make a feature of it. And that's all your scribes done. Scribing is what really sets fitted furniture apart from anything that you could buy at the shop, so it's definitely worth spending the time to get it right to give a really slick finish. However, remember that it doesn't need to be perfect, as caulk will help hide any gaps. You can see here that I didn't do a very good job with the skirting cutout, but caulk saved me. Here's how all the scribes look after caulking. I wouldn't recommend caulking the profile to floor gap or profile to ceiling gap if there's a floor above, as the caulk can easily crack as pressure on the floorboards displaces it. Don't feel like you need to stick to just one of the scribing methods I've shown you. You can use any combination depending on your circumstances and what tools you've got. From this point, you've only really got small and easy jobs to do, so you can just crack on. There's no specific order to do them in, but I would recommend fitting your doorknobs first, because it can be really hard to open and close your doors without those doorknobs on after fitting the profiles. Mark the position that you're happy with, and then grab a wood drill bit and your combi drill, making sure you have a scrap piece of wood pushed up against the back of the door where the bit will exit. This will stop the back of the door from tearing out as the bit pushes through. Screw your knob on and it's as easy as that. You may sometimes find that you have to shorten the length of the screw that goes into the knob, which you can do with a hacksaw and a mitre box or an angle grinder. You may not need to do this next stage at all, and if you do, ideally you would have done it before building the framework. As carefully as you might have checked the studs you use for the framework, you may miss that some areas have sap. This is the last thing that you want to get on your clothes, so you need to address it. Use a heat gun to encourage the sap out and wipe it up. Keep going until no more is seeping out. You can also use a heat gun, or alternatively a very expensive hairdryer, for removing stickers. You're probably going to need to add some stops to prevent the doors from closing too far. You can cut a simple shape out of some MDF and glue it in place. Now onto the rails. You want to position the location of the brackets so they sit halfway back into the wardrobe. Once you've marked those positions, screw the brackets in place. I suggest measuring a gap between the brackets, then removing a couple of millimeters to make sure that the rails slip in with a little room to spare. Masking tape allows you to mark the cut line on the rail and also reduces the chance of the saw blade slipping when you start the cut. I've got the best results by using a hacksaw and a mitre box to cut the metal rails to size. If there are any sharp edges once you've cut through, use a file or sandpaper to smooth them over. And then it's just a case of slotting the rails into the brackets. While these hinges are soft close, to make them close totally silently, you can stick some little rubber stops onto the door frame. You'll find that most conceal hinges come with little covers for a smarter finish. You can just clip these on once you're happy with your door adjustments. And finally, the last job is to have a really good hoover of every surface prior to painting. You can now do a thorough quality check and stand back to admire your work. This customer chose to paint the wardrobe themselves. You can find links to some excellent MDF painting videos in the description. The approach to building your own fitted wardrobe that I've shown you in these videos certainly isn't conventional, but having built a few this way, I honestly believe that it's the best way to strike a really good balance between cost and looks without having to buy loads of expensive gear or have loads of experience. The total material cost of this build came to £300. You can probably expect to spend another £100 or so on paint, rollers and brushes. To put that in perspective, my friend recently had a quote from a national fitted furniture chain for a 5-door simple wardrobe which was £3,800. And on top of the saving, you'll come away with loads of new skills, possibly some new tools, and something that you're really proud of, so I really would recommend giving it a go. Good luck with your own wardrobe project, and please do let me know how you get on.